I built a small form factor PC, and it didn't go as planned. Hello everyone and welcome to this video. This is my first video on this channel, so I hope you will enjoy this video because, it's a pretty important one being the first one. This is the first time I built an ITX PC, and I've only built ATX PCs, so this was all pretty new to me. However, the case I went for was actually a pretty easy PC to build in, so I didn't really notice any big differences, except of, well, just a little less space to work in, though the case was very modular, so I could take all the panels off, so that didn't really cause for any real problems. So now you're asking, so what exactly went wrong? Why you didn't enjoy building this small form factor PC? And actually it has nothing to do with it being small. It could have also happened with an ATX motherboard. Yes, it's the motherboard. The motherboard was the problem. And no, it wasn't the usual problem that you expect from a motherboard, it just not working. No, it was actually a very stupid thing. But first, I will go over all the parts in this PC. The case I went for is the Cooler Master NR200P. The P means that it comes with a tempered glass panel. However, I did not choose to use the tempered glass panel. And I will also explain later in the video. It will all become clear. Don't worry about it. And then next, the CPU. Well, this one asks for some explanation as well. It's a Ryzen 7 3700X. I know it's from a past generation, but I had a limited budget. I was either going for the 5600X or the 3700X. However, a friend of mine recommended me to go for the 3700X instead. Why? Well, simply because of it being an octa-core CPU, in comparison to the hexa-core CPU of the 5600X. I'm aware that the 5600X performs better in games than the 3700X, but everything else except of gaming, the 3700X really is better, simply because of the 2 extra cores. I do a lot of photography work as well as videography work, so I really do need those extra 2 cores. And the 3700X was also a lot cheaper than 5600X. These days it's really hard to get a 5000 series Ryzen, so it was actually a pretty simple choice for me. Next is the motherboard. This is where the problem started. This is a Gigabyte Aorus B550i Pro AX. It's a good motherboard, but I did run into some problems with the first one I got. This is the second B550i. The first one, well, simply put, there were some screws stripped. Yes, there were some screws stripped on the motherboard. The heatsink that goes on top of the M.2 drive was held together, obviously, with some screws. Now, one of those screws was stripped, so that meant that I could not remove the heatsink from the motherboard, which means that I couldn't put in my M.2 drive, which means that the motherboard became basically useless because I need that M.2 drive. However, that motherboard came with a second M.2 drive, so I decided I had to wait for another 4 days for the new motherboard to arrive. So I figured I need this PC, so I decided to build the PC with the faulty motherboard and then wait and upgrade when the new one arrives. And I'll just use the other M.2 slot, which is a bit slower, but it will do the trick for 4 days, right? So I built the entire PC, and at the end I was going to install the M.2 drive at the back of the motherboard. That screw was also stripped. So I wonder what went wrong. Did it go wrong in the factory, or did Amazon send me a pre-used motherboard? I guess we'll never know, I suppose. But in the end, the second motherboard that arrived 4 days later was actually, it didn't have any stripped screws, so I could work with that one. So the footage that you will see are actually two footage days put together. So you will see some weird stuff in the video, like me wearing different clothes and the AIO that's just a bit, yeah, you'll see. Talking about the AIO, so this is the one I went for. Hold on, this is a puppy. Are you an AIO? No, I think so. So this is the one I went for. It's the Cooler Master ML240L. It's a very good, cheap AIO. It came in white, so it fit perfectly with the build. This is the first time I installed an AIO actually, so it was all pretty new to me. I went for the Corsair, what are you called? Vengeance RGB Pro RAM. I really like this RAM because of the RGB, though you can't see the RGB in my case, but whatever, it's there. I can't see it, but at least the RGB is there. It's pretty fast RAM, it's 3200 MHz, so it's not slow, it's not super fast either. I think it's the perfect middle ground if you're on a budget, so yeah. I'm really happy with this memory actually, it was pretty cheap too. Since the Cooler Master NR200P doesn't support an ATX power supply, I had to go for an SFX power supply. Though it is possible to install an ATX PSU in this particular case, but you need a mounting bracket for it that you have to buy separately. And also, the ATX PSU really takes up a lot of space in your case, which limits your GPU supports. So that's why I went for an SFX PSU, because I did not want to lose that space. SFX PSUs are a lot more expensive than ATX PSUs, but as I mentioned, the space is limited in an ITX case, so that's why I went for the Corsair SF750. It's a pretty good SFX PSU. It's 750 watts, so there is room for upgrading, which I will also do in hopefully the near future, because the GPU remained the same. The Gigabyte RX580. I'm aware that this GPU is quite old, but it's holding up quite fine. And the reason why I didn't upgrade GPU yet is... honestly, do I have to explain? These times, oh, who would have thought? Who would have thought, honestly? So the RX580 is still a pretty good card, even though it's actually quite a lot of years old already. It's considered to be still a great 1080p card. However, I really want to get into 4K gaming in the future, so I hope I will get my hands on a new GPU soon, like a 3070 or the 3080, or even the 6800 XT. And some things really went wrong with this build. I built it completely with a new motherboard 4 days later. All was fine, I did the cable management, stuff like that, and I plugged it into all the cables on my setup, so everything was going fine. I checked the BIOS, and then I noticed that the CPU was running at 92 degrees Celsius. I was like, what, how? So I took the AIO back off, and I removed the thermal paste, and I put new thermal paste back on it, and then it was running very cool. So I don't know exactly what went wrong. I don't know if it was an error that I did or if it was the thermal paste. I just don't know. So whatever, the PC is running very cool now. So I'm a happy woman. And then the next problem is a very, very horrible problem, because the RGB header on the motherboard doesn't work. I haven't figured out how to make it work. I flipped the cable back, I flipped the cable again, and since it's an ITX board, it's really quite hard to constantly flip the cable around because the memory is in the way and the AIO is in the way and the GPU is in the way, so it was really annoying, and I just gave up after a while. I connected the RGB fans directly into the power supply with an adapter and a fan controller, so now it works, but it's still not the way I want it to work, because I want to control my RGB from my PC itself without using a remote. So I still have to figure that out. It's been a week since I built this PC and I still haven't found the mood yet to figure it out, and honestly, you can't see the RGB anyways in this case, well, except of the two fans that you'll see later. All this talk, yada yada yada, you know what? Let's just show the build itself. The PC build that I've just shown you isn't actually complete, because where's the graphics card? Where are the side panels? Where is that? Well, I've got an answer to that, and that is my camera just did not record that part. That was another problem that I had with this PC build, so it has nothing to do with the actual PC itself, but it did ruin my experience a little as well. But of course it has nothing to do with the PC. I think my camera just ran out of storage, though that doesn't explain why I didn't record it, but that doesn't matter now. As you can see, I mounted the AIO to the side panel, and the only reason why I did that and not go for the tempered glass is because if you want to go for the tempered glass panel on this case, you have to mount your GPU vertically and mount the AIO to the bottom of the case. That is not ideal, especially with this AIO, and actually most AIOs have the pump built inside of the CPU block. The pump needs to be lower than the radiator, or at least on the same level, like in my build. So that's a huge disadvantage of this case, I think, because the only way you can use an AIO in this case, or a 240mm AIO, is by either mounting it to the side panel, which means you don't have tempered glass, or you mount it on the bottom, which is not good for the AIO itself. So the PC is all fine now, even though I did run into some problems. I'm very happy about that. And I'm also happy for you watching this video. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, because it helps me a lot. And also press that subscribe button and maybe click the bell as well, so you get notifications. You know how it works. You know how YouTube works, I hope, I think. So thank you so much for watching my very first video on this channel. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye!